Tomcat Radio Show. Tomcat, call the ball. Tomcat ball 6-0. Roger ball.
Hello and welcome to the F-14 Tomcat Radio Show podcast, straight out of Grumman, Calverton, where all 712 airframes are built. Glad to have you guys aboard tonight. We have an amazing show about to launch, but before we give the signal to spool up the engines and introduce our guest, first I want to stop and say it's an honor to do this, to create a platform that is so rightfully deserved, one that gives the opportunity for Grumman and Navy personnel, along with many others, a chance to speak, to bring their stories to life. They risked it all for us, their families. They paid a huge sacrifice, enduring many months of loneliness, making it through these hard times. Again, they gave it all from the Grumman assembly lines at Bethpage to Calverton, the flight decks of the U.S. Navy. Everyone involved, it's legendary. Behind these people stands the greatest history in modern naval aviation. We're all proud here at F-14 Calverton, all things Grumman, to present them and all of you with this very platform we call the F-14 Tomcat Radio Show podcast, straight out of Grumman, Calverton. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let's hit the switch, open the Top Gun hangar door, and look at the career of a Top Gun instructor. He's our featured aircrew this month, and he's not just a Top Gun instructor. He's not just a VF-2 Bullet. He's also the commander of VF-211, the Checkmates. And that is Commander Dave, call sign bio, Baronic. Good evening, sir, and welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here representing aviators and participating in your F-14 podcast.
Thank you, sir. It's great, and I appreciate that. It's going to be a great show tonight. Really excited to have our pilot co-host tonight, Jerry Leakey, call sign Leakster, VF-102 Diamondback, F-14A and F-14B. Our Rio co-host is Eric McMullen, call sign Siphon, VF-31 F-14D Tomcatters.
Good evening.
And our maintainer, well, he's world famous, as we all know. He's Brian from the world famous Pukin Dogs, Fighter Squadron 143.
Good evening, everybody.
And also joined by a good friend of mine, our co-host. He's CJ. He's also U.S. Army, OIF, and he also runs a Tomcat Hunter page on IG.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
And of course, I'm your host. I'm the show producer. My name's Lorenzo. Great to have everybody here tonight. Leakster, Siphon, you guys good to go?
Absolutely, and excited. Really happy to meet Bio. Interesting cat.
Indeed. We are fortunate to have a guy who lived through some stuff that I certainly only kind of heard about, so it's pretty cool to be able to talk to you, Dave.
You know, that's what happens when you get to be old. You live through some of those things that people talk about or heard about.
Well, you've got quite an interesting background and almost a Renaissance man, you know, with the books that you've published. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that stuff, what you've been doing the last few years.
Okay, sure. You know, I did my 20 years in the Navy, and being a Rio was like the culmination of my dream, Plan B. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. My eyesight went bad in college, so I wanted to be a Rio. As you guys know, it's still very competitive. You don't just say, I want to be a Rio.
Yep.
So I was fortunate. I got to go to Pensacola. After graduating from Georgia Tech, I went to Pensacola. I made it through the NFO training and got selected to be an F-14 Rio, and I went to the F-14 RAG in 1980 in Miramar. So then I did a full 20-year career, and I just, you know, I did the best I could. I was fortunate I got the opportunity to be a Top Gun instructor. Went on and went back to the F-14 after that. Did too much time on staffs, and then I got selected, though, to be a commanding officer of a squadron, and then I retired. So, you know, that was just a great life for me. And then about a year maybe after I retired, I was driving home from work from my job, and I thought, I'm going to write a book. So it wasn't something that I planned a long time. It was just something that came to mind after I retired. And then I just started working on it and kept doing whatever it took until I got that first book published. And that was Top Gun Days. And I mean, that that is a major effort, and it takes a lot of persistence also. But that's one thing that, I found that I was able to do because I really wanted to get it out. And also I had a lot of support from my wife. So if you guys want to talk about writing books later, let me know. But that's how my books came out.
Well, I think that's amazing. I mean, what's really interesting about the culture of being in a fighter squadron is that at some point, shortly after you become part of a squadron, when you're at sea, you look around a ready room and you realize you're in a room of just unbelievable people. And you think to yourself, this is a group of people that could literally do anything. We could take over the world. We could start a company. Whatever we did with this group of people, we're going to be successful. I don't know if that's egotistical or it goes with the culture, but I know that's how every single guy I know that I flew with in the Navy would look around, and you just felt so blessed to be part of a team like that, and you knew you could do anything. And the stories that you would be able to tell each other and laugh about, the near-death experiences and the loss of friends and all the crazy stuff that happens. I don't know how many times we would look at each other and say, man, we really need to just gather up these stories and put them in a book because they're incredibly entertaining. And anyways, I applaud you for bringing that, for other people to enjoy, because it really is a difficult task. And that's very cool that you were able to get that done.
Your comment reminded me of something. In my first squadron, there was a Rio in our sister squadron who, we ate mid-rats with our sister squadron sometimes. And this guy would sit there and he would make notes at mid-rat. And somebody asked him one night, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "This would make a great book." He goes, "I'm making notes for my book." Well, he didn't write one. And then, 20 years later, when I was writing my book, I was sitting there going, man, I wish I'd made some notes. But as all of you guys know, and listeners too, when you go through your life, when something makes a big impression on you, it's in there. You got it in your brain. And so I was able to capture a lot of those things in my books. I was supported by, here's a couple of references I use. One, I use my logbooks. My Navy logbook. I used a couple of other notes that I used to write. One of the most valuable references for this last book is my wife saved all the letters that I wrote her from deployments.
Wow. Back in the days before email.
Yeah, that's right. And so when I was doing the research for this book, we looked through all those letters and I got a lot of details out of those. And then the final thing that I did was I actually contacted some of the other people that were in the squadrons, and I go, "Is this how you remember that?" And a couple of times over the years, if somebody says they didn't remember it at all, or I would drop the story. I left it out, because I go, okay, maybe I, misremembered it.
That's really funny. I have all of mine too, and as a matter of fact, I wrote some of the letters on the back of the daily flight schedules.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you could flip the letter over and see who flew which missions and who flew together, and it was all captured there.
Yep.
So I can imagine how those letters bring back so many memories like that.
And that's gold. I mean, there have been multiple times I've thought to myself, I remember what I did on that day, but I don't know what anybody else did that day. I mean, I know Brian's probably thinking the same thing. Like, you can see here's the cycles. We did this cycle. We did this cycle. This was a 4-jet launch. This was a 2-jet launch. And you could just kind of put together your day by looking at that. Right, Brian?
Definitely. Yeah. I wish I would have flight schedule from back then and remember exactly what we were flying.
So Bio, that must've been like a pretty cool process to go through, just to kind of reconstruct all those memories.
It was fascinating. I mean, well, one thing, it became my hobby. So, that's the kind of life I lead. Luckily our life's pretty simple. We don't have any kids. My wife was a realtor. So on a lot of weekends, she'd be out doing real estate and I could sit at home, putting the pieces together. And it was a lot of fun. Something else. So early on, when I was writing my very first book, she talked about going out to dinner and I said, "Oh, I need to finish this chapter." And she goes, "That book is not going to rule your life." And so she was very supportive and helpful, but she also helped me keep it in perspective. So, you know, I mean, you guys all have hopefully somebody in your life that helps you with all that too. So, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun reliving that.
I was wondering if could we take you back? When we were talking to you before we started, you were talking about like what it was like when you first got the idea. Hey, I'm going to go Tomcats. You know, because at that point, I know Leekster was thinking the same thing. But for you, 1980 time frame, you used the word to describe the Tomcat that was like a spaceship. Talked about that.
Well, when I was in Pensacola, they were still sending Rios to F4 Phantoms also. And I respect the Phantom, but it was already getting old. This was, 1980. And I wanted to go Tomcats. I don't know about you guys when you got in the fleet, Brian also, but I really had no idea what I was getting into. And so the more you learn about it, the more you're just going like, this is amazing. And then, the complexity, the power, the maneuverability, the weapon system, it's all just amazing. And even the complexity, it could be intimidating, but you don't get that far by being easily intimidated. And so, the Navy teaches you what you need to know, and you apply yourself and keep trying and learning. And pretty soon you are, the master of this spaceship. Yeah, it was an amazing airplane back in 1980, 81. It was still very hot.
Do you remember when you were going through training? From my experience, it seemed like, pretty much everybody that shows up there says, I want to fly F-14s, or I want to, especially in those days, right? But if you get, almost within the first 2 weeks, when guys go up and some of them are throwing up all over themselves, they have a change of heart, right, on what kind of airplane maybe is better suited for them. So I remember that there was a lot of folks that had never flown an airplane before, and they come in the military and they strap you into this thing with all the survival gear and the helmet and the mask and the gloves, and you restricted from moving, and you're sweating, and then the next thing you know, you're up in the air pulling G's and people are throwing up all over themselves, and they go, wow, maybe this isn't the right place for me. But do you remember any of that stuff, or flying those intercepts?
Oh, definitely. So I get to Pensacola, and several guys in my class had other airplanes. Some guys wanted to fly P3s for various reasons. And it just because F-14s was my dream doesn't mean it was theirs. And a couple other guys wanted to fly A6s. So there were guys for almost everything that wanted to do it. And then a lot of guys at that point, back in 1980, didn't care. And in fact, a lot of guys really didn't know the difference between an F-14. They had to study to learn that, which is something that I knew coming in because
that's amazing.
I'd been an aviation fan. Well, not only did those guys not know, but some of those guys who just kind of wandered in, they got selected for F-14s and ended up being, good guys, pilots or Rios, even though they hadn't been dreaming of this like I had, Okay, so the other thing is, I got sick on my first couple of flights in Pensacola because I didn't have any flying experience. I had very little, and I got sick, but it did not dim my enthusiasm at all. And I got over it.
Yeah.
And luckily we didn't have to go through the damn centrifuge either back then. That would have been horrible.
That's a gut wrencher.
Yeah.
Yeah. For I think most guys, almost everybody has some kind of, what do they call it, aeronautical adaptability issues. I remember my first T-34 flight. What's the max G on a T-34? Was it 3.5 Gs, something like that? And I remember we came in the break, and the guy was a C-130 pilot, an Air Force C-130 pilot, flying my T-34 in my front seat, or I was in his back seat, and he pulled right to I think it was 4.5. Pulled right to 4.5, and I went, whoop, little tiny soda straw view, and like, oh, I should do something about that. I never had a problem with it after that, but everyone has a little bit, I think.
Oh yeah.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking about after, the training in Pensacola and all this, and then 2 years later, you end up in a fleet squadron, and it's like, each step is like opening a whole new world. But we'll get into that. Go ahead. I think somebody's going to say something else.
Well, then you transition to the RAG, right? You get out of training and you go to Miramar to go to the RAG. And one thing I noticed different between the training command and showing up at the RAG was, the Tomcat community had its own culture, right? So you're more into a culturally centric environment that, remember when they taught you your radio voice, right? I mean, I remember them focusing a lot on Rios talking on the radio and making sure that you didn't embarrass yourself on the radio and things like that.
Smooth talking.
They did not do that for us back then. Really?
Is that right?
Yeah. So Leekster, when did you go to the RAG the first time?
Oh, 1990, I think.
I got to
89.
tell you guys, it was back in 1980. It was a different world. The guys and it was all guys back then. Many of the RAG instructors at Miramar, many of them had been Vietnam combat veterans and Phantoms, and some of the pilots were F-8s. And then a lot of other guys were in the initial cadre of F-14s. And then also the air traffic control environment back in the 70s when these guys started was way different. It was like the Wild West. And the stories that when we would have, we'd get weathered out sometimes. So we'd hang out in the coffee mess and get just dozens of people in there. And the old guys would tell stories. You'd just sit there and you'd sit there and go like, this is awesome. This is where I want to be, but then it's like, we can't do that anymore, but it's still tons of fun anyway. I mean, and another example, this is, borderline unpleasant, but drinking and driving used to be, whatever, it's part of the culture. And that changed in the 80s. So it was a different world when I first got there. I can bring this back to the mission. The F-14 had no challengers in terms of radar missiles and all that. And so the RAG and Top Gun spent a lot of time teaching the F-14 pilots to defeat a MiG-17 and a MiG-21 in a dogfight. Now that's an exaggeration. They also, even as a Rio, they taught you had to, manage the radar picture, drive the intercept and all that stuff. But the emphasis really changed, between 1980 and especially the last time I went through the RAG in 1996.
So, of course, for us, my timeline is, roughly 20 years behind you, roughly. And, of course, for you, the design of the Tomcat being to defeat the Soviet bomber coming over the horizon, firing some kind of cruise missile at the strike group. You got to defeat that supersonic missile coming at the strike group sort of thing. And by the time I was flying, that wasn't a threat at all. So we never even really trained to that. So.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because that is, and I say this all the time, that's one of my buttons. You look at the original Tomcat literature and that cruise missile, the carrier air defense mission was one of two co-equal missions. The Tomcat was the Navy's fighter. It wasn't the Navy's interceptor or defender. I mean, it had those giant stabs. It had that incredible canopy. It had that gun. It had the dogfight modes on the radar because it incorporated all the lessons from Vietnam. And one of the biggest lessons from Vietnam was maneuverability and visibility. So the Tomcat was a dogfighter from day one. It was as much of a dogfighter as they could possibly make it. I'm serious. The RAG and Top Gun spent a lot of time practicing dogfighting. And our mission was to escort A6s or A7s over the beach. I mean, so really the cruise missile threat was, in fact, we didn't train to that very often.
That's interesting.
It was difficult to train to, and it was so easy. I mean, you just get in the jamming was hard, but you either do it or don't, anyway. A lot of people on the internet say the Tomcat was an interceptor, and I throw the flag on that.
I have to agree 100%. it was a pure air-to-air
go ahead.
syllabus, similar probably to what you did, Bio. I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't think, we practiced the, the chainsaw mission or the bear type stuff, except maybe in the simulator. And then when we went out on the ship, I did a couple of them. And really all you did was get in the airplane, shoot off the front end and fly, 400 or 500 miles away, and then turn around and do a rope-a-dope and then turn around and come back and hope you didn't get lost.
You got it.
That's good to say. I mean, I think when people talk about the Tomcat as being just an interceptor, they're missing the point, but they're also missing the fact that Grumman had a much better vision of it too. I mean, like you say, that the Navy had learned from the F4 and the joint development timeline that was, and they saw where the F-111 was going and went, this is not going to work. And so being able to roll that all into what they made out of the Tomcat and see that from when you flew it to when Leekster flew it to when I was flying it, we were certainly doing the air-to-air mission, but it was 70-80% focused on the air-to-ground, honestly, by the time I was going through.
That's almost 30 years in, generational difference on how this airplane matured.
And Siphon, you said it, and this is not just to make the Grumman people feel good, but everything that I've read, Grumman had a better vision for what the Navy needed. You're right. They set the bar high for themselves, and they designed the best airplane they could, given some of the biggest restrictions were financial. They were stuck with the engines, and they were, and the radar was, anyway. So yeah, Grumman did a nice job with it.
So after when you finish the RAG and you're out there in Miramar, which is everybody's dream come true, that's amazing. You get to live there in San Diego and fly out of there. That's so cool. And then did they give you a choice of squadron, or did they just assign you guys, or what did that look like? Was it a draft pick like in the pro baseball leagues?
It was funny. They as we get near the end of the RAG, they said, okay, you guys ought to start thinking about what squadrons you want to go to. So one of my buddies and I said, let's try to do this right. So we actually wandered around Miramar and went up into a couple of ready rooms.
Wow.
And and I talked to some friends, a guy from Georgia Tech that was in another squadron already, and just, and so then we wrote our wish list and handed it into the RAG guys. And I don't know if they looked at them and then threw them away, or if they just threw them away immediately. But
so it was basically it was a sit down clown kind of thing, right?
Yeah. I went to VF-24, but I hadn't even, I don't think I'd even visited them. And so looking back, I mean, that set the whole path of my Navy career.
Mm.
Exactly. And the timing of your arrival is usually critical to how that plays out, right? Did you show up right after they came back from deployment, or right before they were going to go on deployment, or where were they in the training syllabus, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I wish those are the kind of things you should think about, which I had not thought about, but I showed up in April and we went on deployment in September. So I was there, that's, 5 months. I had time to go to Air Wing Fallon back then, which in 1981, Air Wing Fallon was not that good. And
I'm thinking you need to elaborate on that.
Just not that good.
We did the
there was no beer in the Coke machine in the hallway. Is this the relevance?
Well, Fallon looked like it had been, put together out of plywood back in the 1940s. Back then.
You mean it wasn't?
Well, now it's got all these, nice quarters and air conditioning, everything. And they didn't have a tax range back then.
It was camping at Fallon.
What's that?
Camping at Fallon.
Yeah. And then the other thing, though, was that it felt to me like we were just flying old tactics. I remember flying an escort mission, escorting some A6s. And we're out there with our radars, and we see these bandits, 25 miles ahead, and it's a bunch of A4s and TA4s. Well, we flew behind the A6s, like about at their 4 o'clock and 10 o'clock. 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock. And so we saw the bandits, we accelerate. Well, the A6s are going whatever, 400 knots, 420. So the Tomcats accelerate and it takes you, 10 miles and you're like a mile ahead of the A6s. And so then it's merge plot. And so
Right.
you're merging with the A4s and the A6s are right behind you. So I'm sitting there going like, this doesn't work.
Mm.
Right.
So there's a position for close escort, but that's and I'm really, I'm telling the bad things. We did a lot of good stuff. We did a lot of good air wing training. And as you guys all know, as everybody here knows, you got to do a lot of training to the basics, night tanking, launching big events.
Oh, just the admin. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Rendezvous. Exactly. And so, we did all that, but air wing Fallon in the 80s just wasn't that good in terms of training. And I'd say that also to contrast it. I mean, when I went to Fallon the last time in my career in 1997, I got my butt kicked just from the level of complexity and demand. And, I was a commander and all these lieutenants this is what they've come up with. And so they're handling it well. And naval aviation I definitely saw an increase in capability during my career.
I think that was a massive confidence builder for most people, that when you would go out there and you start with smaller missions and you gradually build up to the bigger missions where you're doing a large strike package and you're getting into EW ranges and all this fancy stuff they have nowadays with the tax range and tax debrief. But to do a large strike package and actually execute that's opposed with bandits.
Right.
I mean, it's the value of that is you can't simulate it. It's something you come back from, and then you're no kidding ready to go execute in the real world. At least you feel like you are.
Yep.
So, I was going to ask you you mentioned about your unfortunate event on a flight deck where the airplane just wasn't good enough to stay in anymore. So tell us about why you had to eject on the flight deck.
Okay, so first off, looking back on this, it was awesome. I mean, it was a great experience.
Sounds like you didn't land in the water.
I did land in the water.
But it was warm water, right?
It was warm water. So we were coming in. This was in December 1981. It was a routine flight. We were coming into land. We happened to be the very first airplane to land, and everything was normal. There was no indication of trouble, nothing. So we land, caught the wire. It was a Saturday afternoon, about 5:15 in the afternoon. We caught the wire. It slows down for just a fraction of a second, and then I felt it just release us. Yeah. So reflexively, I grabbed the lower ejection handle on the front of my seat. I mean, that was a reflex. And then I rolled down the flight deck. Okay, just looking for head nods on the video here. Has anybody here been in a car accident or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've experienced, okay, good. A lot of guys. So you've experienced time distortion. Your brain starts thinking of all these things. Well, that happened to me. But the problem is, one of my most dominant thoughts was, if I pull this handle, there's no going back. We're rocketing out of this plane. So we get to the end of the flight deck and the pilot goes, eject, eject. Well, I mean, the time that I just told you about took like 1 second.
Right.
From the time you grab the cable to the time we're at the end of the flight deck, after it didn't slow us down or didn't stop us. So my pilot was the squadron commander, Bill Switzer. He had been a Blue Angel. He had, about 200 combat missions in Vietnam and F-8 Crusaders, which I love the F-8. And so, he was the skipper. And we get to the end, and he said eject, and the tone of his voice was the way I could still hear it in my ears. It's like, what are you waiting for, bio? So anyway, I pulled the handle as we're getting to the end of the angle. And then my canopy came off, and when my seat fired, I blacked out, which is one of the great disappointments of my life. But I came to just before I hit the water. And luckily, the plane had rolled left a little bit, because my seat came out as the plane was falling. So I went up a little bit and then started falling. And if I had landed on the flight deck, I would not have had a parachute. So I would have got beat up or killed. So my parachute opened just before I hit the water. I splashed in, and then my Flu 8 inflated and I popped up. And so this, I do a little bit of speaking sometimes to groups, and I talk to them about the value of training, because when I was in the water, all the stuff that they taught us in Pensacola came back to mind.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of good things started happening. I mean, I tried to release my Coke fittings, my gloves. I couldn't get to my Coke fittings. So I took my hands and I just flung them like this, and my gloves flew off. And I'd go like, that's pretty cool. So I undid my Coke fittings. Then I noticed I was tangled up in my parachute. And I remember what they taught us in Pensacola. They said, back out. So I tried to back out of my parachute, and I couldn't. I was just getting more tangled up. So about this time, I'm still taking things in. And one of the coolest damn things that I have ever seen was my jet floating on the water right next to me, and the carrier Constellation going by behind the jet, and dozens of people on the edge of the flight deck ran over to look at the show, the guy in the water.
I can't imagine how big that boat must have looked.
Oh my goodness, what a surreal feeling! Yeah, seriously.
I'd give $1,000 if I'd had a camera then that I could just go, this looks cool, click.
GoPro.
I always found it strange when you look at, as an aviator, when you look at the carrier from the water level. It always looks so strange because you're used to seeing it from the top, right? It's just so weird. That would be a weird thing to be swimming next to this monstrous thing going by you. I can't imagine.
Afraid of the screws.
Do you have any recollection of anybody actually pointing at you, or anybody like, hey, there he is?
I could see him. I mean, I gave them thumbs up, and they gave me thumbs up back and all that. I wasn't thinking about the screws, but I did notice that I was getting tangled up more in my parachute, and I knew from training that a parachute will drag you under.
Yeah.
So the things that I had going for me were the Flu 8. I was floating like a cork. The water was warm, and it was daytime. But then I had to get out of that parachute. So I pulled out my switchblade, and I tried to open it, but they had duct taped the blades closed because they had a habit of popping open during the periodic inspections. So I'm
just what you want, really.
What's that?
Just what you want, really. Totally useful.
Yeah. So I'm using my thumbnail to find the end of the duct tape. You find the end of the tape. And so I vowed to myself at that moment, I go, if I get out of this, I'm going to fold the tab over and make a tab for the rest of my career, which I did. So anyway, I got the tape off, popped the switchblade open, and took a slice. And this is another thing. That was like the world's sharpest switchblade. I took one swipe, and it cut almost all the lines. I mean, it cut almost all the ones that I had in my hand. I was just amazed. So by this time, the helicopter is over me. The helicopter pilot, Lieutenant Commander Sam Taylor from HS-8, he was coming around the back of the ship on his orbit, and he saw us go over the side. And so he just came right around the back of the ship and came over on top of me at about 30 or 40 feet. And so I'm getting all the helicopter wind and spray, and I look up. I can see the guy very clearly, the crewman hanging out the side looking at me. I mean, he's only 40 feet away. So I give him 2 thumbs up, and the helicopter flies away. I go, well, I wasn't done. So what they did was they went to check on the pilot, who I had not even thought about him. I still didn't think about him. I just knew the helicopter flew away. So I continued cutting shroud lines and trying to get ready. So then the pilot, the skipper behind me, saw me messing with my parachute. He he waved the helicopter back to me. They came over, and they had the cable and the harness lowered, and they dragged it to me. I wrapped it around myself, and they pulled me up, and they had to lower me back down. I had to cut some more shroud lines, and they pulled me in.
Nice.
So then I get in the helicopter, and I was in the water about 3 minutes. And I get in the helicopter, and I can hear them shouting to each other. And I go, what's going on? And one of the crewmen goes, we lost a pilot. And I go, shit. I killed the skipper. That's what I thought.
Wow. Yeah, of course.
Well, what they meant was they lost sight of the pilot because he drifted in the calm ocean. And then somebody goes, oh, there he is. There he is. And I'm going, God, don't say that again. So when we get over him, they lower a swimmer to him. They pulled him up, and he gets in the helicopter. And I go, skipper, we had to eject, right? And he goes, yeah, bio. He goes,
You did good. Thank you.
So then we got to the so speaking of the screws, when we got back on deck and debriefed the next day, I mean, so that it was just so cool flying back to the ship and getting out and feeling, just being, alive. The skipper fractured a vertebrae in his neck, but he was able to walk down to medical by himself, and he got better after a few weeks. But we were talking to the helo guys the next day, and they said, well, bio, do you wonder, we didn't put a swimmer in the water for you because we could see your parachute was starting to get dragged under by the ship's weight, the vortex. And we could see you were still tangled up in it, and we wanted to get you attached to that cable. And I'm going, good, thanks. I'm glad I didn't know that at the time,
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
One big giant sea anchor.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, that, I was fortunate because that did not really affect my flying. I didn't fly around for the next, 2,000 hours or whatever, dreading ejection or thinking that I was bulletproof. I mean, it was just like something that happened and I moved on. I mean, I used to think about it a lot, but then it kind of faded and stuff.
I knew some other folks. Actually, we, of course, so many people ejected out of the F-14 over the years. You could walk into almost any ready room and there would be somebody in there that had ejected, and everybody handled it differently. Some people never did get over it, and they did not enjoy flying anymore after that. It seemed like they had too much anxiety from it or whatever. But most people just bounced right back, especially if you get back in quickly.
How long were you out of the cockpit? I'm assuming you had to do a not a FNAB, but a aviation safety board kind of thing.
Well, I was cleared after about 2 days. What happened was the 4-wire was set to the wrong weight. And if anybody doesn't know what that means, each cable has to be set to the weight of the type of aircraft. We had A7s that were whatever they were, 28,000 or something, E2. And plus it was capable of handling, training command airplanes. So the 4-wire happened to be set. It was just turned on. And it was just, I think it had 14,000 pounds or something like that. That comes to mind. And that happened to be the one that we caught. And so we pulled through that resistance, and then the machinery blew up and the cable parted at each end at the same time. And so we dragged it over the side with us.
Oh.
So we got cleared of, culpability or whatever. It wasn't pilot error or aircrew error. But our flight surgeon said, well, I want you to stay on deck till I finish my report. So he kept me grounded for 5 days. So then when I get ready to go flying again, I was flying with a former F-8 pilot who was East Coast, became an East Coast RAG instructor, Magic Morris. You guys know Magic?
No.
Okay. He was a very colorful guy and a great fighter pilot. And as we're manning up, we're on top of the jet, tightening our harnesses and stuff. And he goes, now, bio, we're probably not going to have to eject on this flight.
Oh, you became that guy.
So that was my ejection. And it was, it was really great to have that experience and survive it.
And it's really interesting because obviously that was something that had nothing to do with the Tomcat. And by the way, for those listening who aren't familiar, if it was set to like you said, 18,000 pounds, Tomcat base weight was like 44,000. At least that's what we're calling it with fuel on top of that. So You're
our landing weight was 51.8 back then.
yeah. So there you go. You're above 50K. I mean, it was set for way less than half of what the actual force put on the cable would have been. But it's interesting to hear you guys talk about knowing everybody knowing the time from the time I first was a Tomcat until we retired it. One, maybe two more jets in that entire time. So it was a different kind of experience by then. And they were essentially all, unfortunately, they're fortunately not aircrew error, but they were unfortunately all aircraft problems.
Yeah.
I don't know, Brian may remember the fuel system difficulty of the number of tanks that we had in the Tomcat and just the complexity of that system. And by the time I was flying it, it was significantly problematic that they were in the mode of flow, which is the way they were transferring fuel around. We had some problems with it. And that's basically what the last Tomcat that ever went down was for that. But from my experience, it was uncommon to have someone in the ready room who had lost a jet or gotten out of a jet. It was really unusual.
We were talking about that the other day in the DFCS system, and Bio was mentioning that he had some thoughts about that as well.
Mm.
Okay, so a quick note about fuel system. On my next deployment, we had a single engine cat shot, and the pilot handled it perfectly. Petro handled it perfectly, flew it away. Then we spent about an hour and a half troubleshooting, trying to transfer fuel. And when we landed, I think we had 800 pounds usable. We could only burn and dump out of the side that had the good engine. Mm-hmm. And the other side, the fuel was trapped due to what you said, a valve that failed when we needed it to work. And we came down and landed, and they said, "Are you guys ready to land?" And I go, "Yep," because we were over max trap, but I go, there's got to be some margin of error in there. I just said, "Yeah, we're coming aboard." Right. Mm-hmm. But I was going to segue to the DFCS. That's something that, and I'm just getting emotional here. But as I was retiring and taking my last Tomcat flight in 1998, and they were still talking about putting in DFCS, and I'm going like, bleep, why didn't they put this darn thing in? And then I talked to some guys who flew with it, and they said, it changed the whole Tomcat. So, Leekster, you can tell guys or Siphon what DFCS did for the F-14.
Well, what's interesting is I believe that, Scott Kelly, the astronaut, he was going through we went through the RAG about the same time, and I believe he was the guy who did all the development work at Pax River, the testing for the digital flight control system, which, the legacy F-14As had TF-30, had engine issues that caused some problems, and, some folks lost control of the airplane. We call it a departure from controlled flight. So you hear pilots call it, I departed the airplane, which means I departed from controlled flight. And a lot of the losses, and I had some personal friends that had this happen to them, were just almost similar to the movie Top Gun, which, where they had an engine compressor stall and the airplane swapped ends, and then they were spinning out of the sky, and the other engine flames out, and now you have no flight controls at work, and your only option is to get out of the airplane at that point. Once they put that digital flight control system in, and the new GE 110 motors, it was a completely different airplane as far as the way that it flew, and the amount of times that it was lost that they had to eject out of, that folks had to get out of an F-14 was zero that I know of. I don't think there was any losses due to departure from controlled flight after the DFC system was put out to the fleet. I could be wrong, but as you said, Bio, a lot of pure fighter pilots complain that the DFCS didn't allow them to do some of the things that you could do in the classic F-14 flight control system.
Interesting. Okay, I hadn't heard that.
Like when you would make a vertical move and you wanted to get the nose down, you could go super high alpha and have the thing pitch really hard coming over the top of a vertical move. And the DFCS would limit how much stab it would give you in some of those cases, and people were not able to pirouette the airplane and do some of the more aggressive maneuvers that we were able to do prior to that. I think, as Siphon mentioned before as well, I think later on they did modify the DFCS to give a little bit more alpha capability for high angle attack maneuvers.
Yeah, I'll just speak to that real briefly. As obviously not a stick and rudder guy, but we did talk about it a lot. That when we went from D03 to, I was in a D, in D03, the software load that we had when I was going through the RAG, to D04, which I had in my first deployment, and then seriously in the last year of the jet, they upgraded D05. Those were not just incremental upgrades; those were like serious revolutionary upgrades. And my understanding from some guys, Twig and some guys like that who'd flown older model Tomcats, that it was restoring some of the AFCS kind of capability with still having the safety threshold that DFCS gave you. Yeah, but where you having a certain control input that meant, oh, I want you to do this, and it gave you that kind of capability back, as well as like you were saying, really for the Tomcat, super high alpha. I mean, it wasn't a Super Hornet still, but it was pretty high alpha. The ability to park the nose up high and still control it and still walk your rudders and get some seriously slow. I mean, you're falling out of the sky, but seriously high alpha, slow airspeed controllability. It was pretty amazing.
Okay, when the F-14 was new, and I remember because I used to read when I was in college, I would read Aviation Week, and they flew F-14s. I think they went to the Med and flew the deployed squadron, and they talked about having, and they had a picture of multiple airplanes sitting there. I mean, they were like 60 or 90 degrees nose up, and they used to do zero airspeed tail slides and then recover.
Right.
And the first F-14s, they would say this plane can't spin.
Right. I remember reading that myself.
Thank you.
It was
and then
yes.
When I was at the RAG in 1980 or 81, the OPSO stood up in front of an AOM and said, okay, we found that it can spin, and it came from doing that zero airspeed thing or the tail slide and coughing an engine. So one's in burner, one's at zero.
That's so good.
And so they said zero airspeed or intentional zero airspeed is now a prohibited maneuver. So.
I had a very unpleasant experience like that once, Bio. Where I was in a vertical fight and I parked it and did the tail slide, prohibited maneuver. I certainly didn't do it intentionally, but once I started going backwards, one of the engines blew, and then it swapped. It started, yawing rapidly, and then the other one went.
Was your Rio yelling at you?
No, he was cool as a cucumber, and he had ejected out of previously from an F-14 that had lost control due to a TF-30 blowing a motor. So, but to that end, it's the airplane. Those low energy departures didn't frighten me as much as a high energy departure, though. That was really where the thing would bite you if you were smoking along and then the thing swapped ends. It would.
I want to jump in here a second. I want to jump in here a second. We got the RWR gauge going off. Looking at the radar screen, it looks like a VF2 bullet on the radar.
Uh-oh.
That's right.
Do we have a copy?
I'm seeing a 2. Yep. Spike 2.
Bio Billy.
Oh, hey, Billy. Small world.
Ha ha. How are you, brother?
How did you hear about this?
Bullets roll, baby.
Billy, they need to have you on.
Lorenzo.
Cool. They need to have you on.
I'm not sure about that, brother, but just listening to your stories. It's awesome. Good to hear from you.
Well, thanks. Good to hear from you also. Billy and I were in VF2 together and then 211. I mean, shoot.
Merry Christmas, Billy. Appreciate you giving them a shout. That's great.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you, Bio.
Thanks, Billy. Thanks for dropping by.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I just grabbed a couple of your books, too. It's a great read. Man, they're awesome.
Oh, you're in there a few places. Do you remember that trick tactic we used? Have you read it yet?
Which one?
Do you remember when we were getting ready for FARP and we used that missile sponge tactic with the guy out in front?
I don't want to be that guy.
We had the same thing in my squadron. We called that guy the detonator. And I think we used that in the bar scene too.
But it didn't work, is my recollection, because I got killed instead of being a shooter. Anyway, man, those were fun days. We used to.
That's right. It didn't work at all.
Nope. Oh well, we did okay. I think we won everything that year or the next year.
A well-decorated
Yeah, I
tail
still
fin.
got the T-shirt.
That's cool. I still got your picture. One of these days, I'm gonna put it on Facebook or Instagram or something. That we had T-shirts made that listed all the competitions that we won.
Oh, that's great.
And the reason we had them done was because our squadron did not get picked by the CAG to go forward.
So it was the Sour Grapes T-shirt.
Yeah,
Well, for the Battle E.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Hey, that picture, and I think it's the pre-Top Gun days is the one with us in the pool on the Steel Beach picnic. That's me, not Rico.
Wait a minute.
Correction.
I'm opening the book right now. Wait a minute.
All right.
We're getting to the bottom of this.
Are you the one wearing the Speedo?
No. I'm on
That's
the red hat with the R on the top.
Oh no. Yeah, that's my bad. Shit.
Russ is called the editor.
Recall the book. Bring them all
Thanks,
back.
Billy.
All right, I'm going to mail my book back by you.
So
Oh,
we'll have
man.
special edition books.
That's embarrassing.
All right, listen. I don't want to get too much of your time, man.
Nah.
You have a Merry Christmas.
Okay, you too, Billy. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, have a Merry Christmas, Billy. Thank you for everything, sir.
Merry Christmas, sir.
All right, man.
So Bio, you eject and now you're on deployment. And then how did that first tour go? You end up going to Top Gun during that tour as a student the first time?
Oh yeah, I went to Top Gun as a student, and I was luckily I was flying with a very capable pilot, capable, dedicated, thoughtful, etc. And so we did very well going through the class, and we both got invited back as instructors. But back in those days, what they did was you went through as a student, then they selected the guys they wanted to come back as instructors, and then I went back and finished my the rest of my JO tour, and then I went back as an instructor almost 2 years after graduating from the class.
Mm.
And then I did 2.5 years as an instructor.
So you did get the Top Gun trophy, huh? I'm joking. I'm joking.
$5. So what was the experience like then? I mean, what'd they have? They had A4s and F5s, or what all did you all get to go?
They had single seat A4s, just A4Es and Fs. So when I was there, they did not have any TA4s. About 1/4 of the instructors were Rios, and we flew in the F5Fs, which was a sweet airplane. So the pilots flew the A4E or A4F or the other versions, F5E and the F5F. That's what pilots flew. And the Rios flew the F5F. And the F5F had controls in the back seat.
Sure.
So I got a fair amount of stick time. I was very bad at first, and then I got to be, passable. I've talked to a lot of people, and they go, oh, F5, that's like a T-38, right? And I go, well, these are F5Es and Fs. And the differences between them and the T-38 is that they had a more powerful engine, and they had leading edge extensions at the wing roots, so there's a bigger wing surface. And they also have maneuvering flaps and leading edge flaps.
Mm-hmm.
Some people want to call them slats because they're on the front, but they call them flaps on the
Leading
front
edge
also.
flaps. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so they have maneuvering devices, which really, improve the airplane's engaged performance. Plus, they
it's significantly different from a T-38 as far as turn rate and radius. Anybody who's flown both, immediately obvious when you try to put any turn on a T-38, it goes into buffet immediately because it's a hard wing. And the F5 will give a real good turn for at least 180 degrees. It's going to be digging nose low, right? I mean, it's a nose low guy basically after that to keep the turn rate on. But they're hard to see, those little guys. So that's something you have to learn to keep your eyes on. Is seeing those F5s is really difficult.
Something about what we were talking about earlier in terms of departures. When I was at Top Gun, I got a pilot taught me to do rudder reversals from the back seat. And so there was, so we'd go out over the Pacific, we'd pull the nose up, pull the throttles back, there was a series of steps to do. And I think I remember the first one that I did, the plane flopped over and got into an inverted spin. But you're in an F5
at 120 knots. You said, right?
Yeah. Yes. But also you're in an F5. So even though, you look up and the world is spinning around, it's like no big deal. You put the flaps up, you stick full aft, plane comes out, engines are still running, and you recover and get on with your flight, And so it was, you could spin the F5 and on a couple of flights for various reasons, I was in multiple inverted spin.
Multiple.
Yeah, but it's not a big deal. Well, one of them was when we were fighting an F-15D. And so an F-5F against an F-15D is, almost a waste of time. Especially 1v1 neutral setup. Anyway, but spinning an F5 is like no big deal. It's just something fun to do. And it was a very sweet little airplane. So did you, Leekster, did you do any adversary flying?
Yeah, when I was at 201, that was after they had downsized a lot of the adversary squadrons. So we were doing all the adversary work all over the place: Fallon, Key West, Oceana, you name it. So.
And what were you in?
In a Tomcat.
Okay, well that's still fun though. It's fun.
Right, and we were a good SU-27 type simulator, right? So you're always trying to simulate some presentation for the good guys, and that was a good simulation for a lot of folks, and a lot of people wanted to fight us. And I think, for dissimilar stuff, the F-14 was a good platform for a lot of Air Force guys to see because of the reacting with the raw gear for one thing. But yeah, because that radar will light you up no matter what, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So what was do you have any impression, Bio, of going through as a student and then coming back as an instructor? Was it a whole, obviously it's a completely different experience. When you go there at Top Gun as a student, you're taking it extremely seriously. You want to be professional and you want to, show your best all the time while you're sometimes being humiliated, but try, they load you up there, right? You get a real chance to kind of be about as good as you'll ever get at that point, right?
Give enough rope to hang yourself, right?
Well, as a student, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's a different back in 1980, when I went through in 1982. They did not have the students brief many flights. Even when I went back as an instructor until 1987, we did not have the students brief many flight. We called on the students to tell us their game plan and debrief a lot of engagements and things. But it's not like it is now where, as I understand it, the students plan and brief most of the flights, I believe. I think it's a better system because you have all of the benefits of the Top Gun instructor level of expertise, but you are having the students actually do the work, and so they're internalizing it a lot more. They're learning a lot more, making them better aviators.
Did you guys do like the mid-kill debrief stuff at that time?
Oh yeah, we did. We did the mid-kill debrief when I went through as a student, and when I went back as an instructor, that was one of my little projects. Every instructor has, a few projects.
Yeah.
But so that must have been, amazing for you as an instructor. As a student, you might get one good mid-kill debrief, right? But as you go through as an instructor, you must have seen dozens of those types of briefs. And those things are amazing, right? To me, that was some of the highlights of my training is listening to those guys tell their stories.
Oh, yeah. 5 or 6 times a year, we would have classes and we had a mid-kill debrief in each one. So, but the difference going back as an instructor is you just have, you're running the show. You have to run the show. And it takes months of intense effort and long days to get qualified as a Top Gun instructor. It's 14-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week or longer. And then, and you've got the support of the other instructors, but the new guy has to put in a lot of the, a lot of effort. And anyway, so by the time you get through that and you get qualified, you really, what's going on. Your situational awareness is just, I'm just do a rough comparison. It's like your first carrier landing. And then, after you've got 100 traps or 200, at least for me, I just had so much more SA. My first
Mm-hmm.
carrier landing is just a blur. I was lucky I was flying with a Phantom pilot who was upgrading to Tomcat, so he got us through the thing. But you know, after I had regular traps, I just was a lot more able to do my my Rio duties.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so being a Top Gun instructor, same thing. Going through as a student, you're just it's just amazing in terms of the flying and all the stuff you have to absorb and all that. And then when you go back as an instructor, you have to run the place, and it's cool.
Did you see some of the big fur balls? I mean, I hear guys back in the 80s and even in the 90s would talk about some of the massive fur balls that they would be able to put together. I'm talking 30, 40 airplanes, something off of San Diego.
No, we didn't
big
have
stuff.
So you might be thinking of they used to have some special events out over San Clemente Island.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they had a mini v mini. I think I went out there a couple of times when I was a few times, but I don't think I had the big picture on that. I was junior when I did that, and they didn't keep doing it that much longer. Well, when I was a instructor at Top Gun, the most we would do we'd have 4 class fighters, and then we'd have 8 or more adversaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were limited. I think the tax range could track 12 airplanes at the time. And so we tried to say, okay, well, there's no, it's not safe to have more than 12, or there's no benefit. But still, if you're one of 8 F5s and A4s, and you're coming into a 12 plane merge, you got to sit there and go, I know all those fighters don't have everybody in sight. And it's just like, you see everybody that you can, and, it was pretty amazing. A 12 airplane fur ball is big enough.
Right. Everybody's had that one experience where somebody comes quite close to you and you never knew they were there, and all of a sudden it goes zinging by and you're like, whoa.
Oh yeah. I used to, that happened to me a couple of times, and I would mark the point on the tax range, and I would dial up, the airplane to airplane distance. It's like a 60-foot miss.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. You're talking a wingspan on an F-14.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nothing.
And one of the guys, I'm the only guy that saw everybody, which is why it was so close, because the other pilot didn't see us and my pilot didn't see him.
Okay, so out of the 4, none of you, it's like that. And I think training rules these days, it's almost hard to imagine that happening these days. Training rules are so restrictive.
Oh, we had 500-foot bubbles.
I honestly can't imagine a 12-plane merge.
Oh yeah, I mean, this was daytime. This was daytime ACM. 500-foot bubbles. But there's just these instant. And since nobody saw it real time, nobody called knock it off. I mean, I saw it, but it's like, well, we're done now.
It's
right.
He's up there.
Let's keep this thing going.
So the level of professional development that you take away from Top Gun, do you see that as something that changed your life or changed you as a person? Because frankly, for me, I saw a lot of that. I mean, the folks that, after you go through that kind of training, I mean, the average person, you go to college and maybe you have to take a speech class, right? Or, unless you're some sort of theater major, you really don't spend a lot of time standing in front of anybody, talking. And by the time you're, a senior lieutenant or in the Navy, you're very comfortable standing in front of a large group of people and giving a professional briefing and making it engaging and even sometimes entertaining. Did you see that in your career?
Well, when I got that, I wish I had gotten all that when I went through as a student, but we just didn't get much time to practice it or get debriefed on or anything. But yeah, coming out of being an instructor, yes, you've had 2.5 years of public speaking at a very high level. Not only do you speak, but every time you do, you've got 20 or 100 fighter pilots and Rios with critique sheets.
Right.
And often, 15 to 20 Top Gun instructors with critique sheets. So you get pretty comfortable, speaking in front of a group like that. But
right, and you also get comfortable with taking criticism. And I think that is something special about aviation is we debrief everything. And if you can't handle criticism or learn from your errors, then you probably don't belong in this business, because those are the things that make you better and keep you alive. And
the other thing that I learned, that's very clear. The key to a successful public speaking is preparation. There's that's a one word that covers a lot of things, but preparation, you just got to put in the time.
Yeah, and whether that's just preparing in terms of technique, or of course preparing in terms of the material, either one,
right? That's right.
Lacking is significant.
Somewhere you got to put in the time.
Yeah.
Well, I know I'm kind of jumping around, but to me, this is really fascinating from a professional standpoint. When you were a commanding officer and now you're selecting guys to go to Top Gun, right? Now you're on the other side, right? And you're picking a couple of your superstars and who are the people that I'm going to send. And a lot goes into that decision. And then when looking at your group of pilots that you were training, or your air crew rather, pilots and RIOs, when you were a CO, did that give you a lot of job satisfaction when you would see these guys develop like that?
By the time I became a skipper, they had changed the selection process in 1997, 98. So I don't recall selecting the guys who went through Top Gun. I think the Bureau was doing it by then. Uh-huh. But, since you're bringing up the CO job, I'll talk about that, but I want to be very careful because, but it was an amazing experience. It was very rewarding. It was humbling, but also you do get an insight into all these junior officers and all these people. I wished I had done a couple of things different as a skipper, that I was just going like, man, I just didn't see this coming. But another thing I can say is, I had a very strong ready room. VF211 in 1997, 98. These guys were very capable. They were serious, professional. Take Billy, who dialed in a minute ago. He was a department head when I was XO, and then he came back to be the acting XO for about a month and a half on the deployment.
Wow.
And he was, and I knew him from VF2 as his JO tour. And then, here he is as a superstar 04 in VF211. But the squadron was full of guys who went on to become skippers later and carrier COs and things like that. And their aviation performance was very strong at all levels. Lieutenant commanders were good. So it was just something. Okay. So if you guys want to, I can pivot this to talking about maintainers.
That'd be excellent.
Now, the entire length of my career, I saw dedicated professionals, guys, even back in the 80s, even when the aviation mission, the F-14's mission was only air to air, and we didn't have, that much of a challenge. It was still a demanding airplane, but it wasn't as old, and but still our maintainers worked hard. They worked long hours, and they sometimes worked miracles. And then later, by the 1990s, the Navy was asking even more of all enlisted people. They had to have warfare specialty qualifications. They had physical readiness training. And, some guys some people, men and women, have made lists of all the demands put on sailors. And it's like, okay, here's all these demands. This is almost a full-time job, but we haven't talked about their skill,
their actual job, right?
Yeah. So, life's not easy. And yet, when I was in 211 as XO and CO, I just saw a bunch of spirit, enthusiasm, commitment from our enlisted sailors, and they worked hard.
And 211, you guys are flying A's still then at that point, right?
Yeah, we were flying A's, and here's a couple of things. A guy asked me the other day about, why was life difficult? And a few things happened. One, we were flying A's. Here's another one. We had 14 airplanes assigned to the squadron. And halfway through the deployment, the number of the standard Tomcat squadron was being reduced from 14 to 10. And so to prepare for that, the Bureau was transferring people and not replacing them. I'm in the Persian Gulf flying Operation Southern Watch, and I get on the satellite phone and I call my Bureau, my detailer, and I go, hey, what about our manning? And he goes, Skipper, the squadron is 10 airplanes. And I go, we've still got 14. Well, I can't help you. But then the worst thing for us was the bulkhead fix, which I don't know if you guys even heard about that. But
which one are you talking about? I thought it sounds vaguely familiar.
Well, it came about in 1987. The 569 bulkhead. Mm-hmm. They discovered cracks in them, and it was also called FLE, fatigue life extension, something like that.
This is one of the titanium welds.
It was some bulkhead in the middle of the fuselage. Yeah. I never heard it called a titanium weld.
Uh-huh.
But the airplanes had to be partially disassembled to have that bulkhead inspected. Oh, and so when you reassemble an F-14, as you guys all know, you've got fuel, hydraulics, electrical, all kinds of stuff that needs to be reconnected. And then a PMCF, Pro A or multiple Pro A's. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what does a normal squadron do in the 30 days before deployment?
Stand down.
Right. And groom their jets, right?
Yes.
We did not do that in VF-211. We had to take apart, I think we had to do 12 of our jets in the 30 days before deployment.
Oh my goodness.
Ow.
And I write about that in this new book, Tomcat Rio. I write about it in a little bit of detail. I mean, basically what I've told you, but a little bit more. Not looking for sympathy, but to give the world an idea of what our sailors went through and did. And they kept fighting. They were dealing with this for the first few months of deployment.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, real quick, we have the RWR going off again. And I'm looking at the radar here. Bio's got tons of friends out here. So,
oh no.
Are you with us? Mike, you got a copy?
Hello.
Hey, good evening. It's Mike from Aircrew Interview.
Oh, hey, Mike.
Hey, Bio. How you doing, mate?
Good. Isn't it past your bedtime?
It is. I'm a bit of a night owl, so I'm happy to be on the show again. So I just want to pop in and say Merry Christmas to everyone, and it's great to catch up with you again, Bio.
Hi. Yeah, I haven't talked to you in a while, man. Good to hear your voice. Thanks for calling in. No, for people that are wondering about my bedtime call, you're calling in from England, aren't you?
England, yes. It's I think it's almost. What is it now? 3:30 time. So it seems like it's almost the show now for me.
Oh man. Yeah. So
happy Christmas, right? Happy Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to all you guys. It's your show's been absolutely amazing. I've recently listened to the last two episodes, the first, 1 and 2, and amazing. And it's great to have Bio on because he's he's a wealth of knowledge on the F-14. So I'm sure your viewers are going to absolutely love this interview. And Bio, we need to catch up hopefully next year, mate, and maybe get another Q&A on the go.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. Well, I was just going to give you congratulations. You've been putting out some good shows also. I like to keep my finger on the pulse of Aircrew Interview, and you're doing a lot of good stuff too. So very nice.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah. I've recently got I don't know if you guys have seen it. I've recently got the Tash back. So that's that's going down well on the channel.
Good.
Yeah, no, it's great. Bio's an absolute special guest, and he's got so many friends out there, and it's awesome. And, Mike, you do an awesome job over there, and I really enjoyed that one of the last interviews you just released, which was with the F-15 pilot. And I believe his name was Greg something, but he talked about a little Tomcat incident off the coast of Asia there, some ACM training, and how he shot down the F-14 in combat, and simulated combat, of course.
Simulated.
But it was a great show, great interview. He's a great personality, really great. Made me smile all the time. And again, thank you for your work over there and what you're doing. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, he was a great guy, and yeah, it was fun to talk about the F-15 versus the F-14. I think that's kind of like an age-old question that constantly goes on in aviation. So it was great to get like an F-15 guy's perspective from that. So yeah, it was fun.
We had some great JOs in 211. I still remember when they came back after fighting some F-16s after deployment. And they came back and they said, Skipper, come on in, look at this gun camera footage. And I went in and there's all these my JOs and F-14As gunning F-16s. And I go,
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Like a proud father. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Good crew coordination.
Well, that was our, we had great strike fighter tactics instructors, the OPSO and the training guys anyway. So, yeah, but that's a whole different subject, Mike. You brought it up though.
Yeah, awesome. But yeah, we got to catch up with you, Mike, eventually. And again, awesome. And Bio, you got an awesome collection of friends, I got to say.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving us a call, Mike. I appreciate it. It's absolutely awesome, and a big Merry Christmas to you guys and everyone over there in England and Europe. Awesome to hear from you tonight.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys, and yeah, Merry Christmas to you folks over there, and yeah, bye up, great catch up, hopefully next year, and yeah, keep up the great work, man.
Okay, Mike, thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers. Have a good night, Mike.
You too.
So
Nice.
Lorenzo, I understand we're obviously we've talked about the fact that Bio's career and specifically his time at Top Gun covered a particular time frame in the mid 80s.
Bio, you were there. You saw it. You knew it. And it's
I
one thing I'm jealous of. It's what it must have been like to stand with the hangar doors open at Miramar at sunset. What your eyes saw. Oh my God.
I got to tell you, back back in those days at sunset, we were usually over at the club already. So
Not a scene they saw.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. This is, I just wasn't that much of a philosophical guy or whatever, and it just follows on to some other things that I said. It's like, God, if I ever realized that this is going to end, I would have taken more pictures. I would have gone around and talked to people more and all that. But it's like, this is your daily life. But that's why you got to be. It's your daily life. It's your job.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's not an average job, that's for sure.
But you
Quite a
gotta own it.
special one.
So I was gonna take you back to when you were at Divo, go back a few years, or 1 or 2 years, and you were in charge of maintainers that were basically taking care of the airplane that you love to fly. Guys like Brian and others. What was some of the memorable things you had there in terms of like leadership to be able to say, I'm the guy who's going to trust the thing that you're working on. I'm the guy who's going to actually have to go put into effect the thing that I'm leading you. I mean, granted, you weren't showing them how to replace the boxes or how to do the maintenance they were doing, but nonetheless, you were still in a sense responsible for what they were doing.
Okay, so one of those stories goes back to before I was a Divo, when I was a branch officer. And I told this story in Top Gun days, but I'll tell it here real quick. When I was going through Top Gun, we were out there. This was in the 1v1 phase. So we didn't need much of the radar. So, but every day I would run a complete burr card. Siphon, did you guys still do burr cards?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, and Leakster, you know what that is, but everybody else, there's all these bits and you have to run them, and some of them take 20 seconds, some of them take 40 seconds. And it takes time when you're flying in the airplane. You got to navigate, communicate, you're running and write notes on this. Anyway, so, okay. I'm going through Top Gun, doing 1v1s, and I'm still doing this burr card. And I'm trying to be a conscientious Rio, and we come back, and I write up a gripe, and it says, radar doesn't have PD mode. PD mode's in-op. And I write the complete burr card. So the next day, they gave us the same jet. We flew out. I did the same burr card, got the same thing, no PD modes. And I wrote repeat gripe. Remember that when you write up a gripe?
Yep. It's sort of like, hey, knock, knock.
Repeat. Well,
because you're assuming they didn't do anything.
Right. So the third day,
It's kind of weird.
third day in a row, same jet, same situation. So, I'm in Top Gun doing 1v1s, and we get back, and I was the AQ branch officer back when they had AQs to operate the radar. And these were my guys not touching my radar gripe. And I remember I went back into the work center, and this was in San Diego. It was like 95 degrees, hot September afternoon. And I go back in, I go, I wrote up this gripe, and I gave you guys bird cards and blah, blah, blah. Well, they didn't know what to say. They just let me go off. And then I walked out, and about a half hour later, the MO, the maintenance officer, calls my pilot aside and goes, okay, here's the story. He goes, you guys are doing 1v1s this week, right? And my pilot goes, yeah. And he goes, you don't need PD modes of the radar, do you? And he goes, no. And he goes, okay, we are swamped right now because they were either transferring airplanes or building up airplanes or something. He goes, we didn't touch your radar.
Right.
And so my pilot comes to me and he goes, Bio, they didn't touch our radar. I'm going, well, why didn't they tell us? Why didn't they tell me the first day? Anyway, so from that, though, I learned to, maybe listen a little bit more or ask before you go off, whatever. So later when I was a Divo, I had to work with the ordies for the new AIM-54C. We were the second squadron to deploy the AIM-54 Charlies. And so, or the second air wing, we had VF2 and VF1 together. And so, I was talking to the ordies and the AQs and everybody about the AIM-54 Charlies. When I got into more leadership stuff was when I was the personnel officer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here we go.
Well, here's why. Because when you're a division officer, you've got division chiefs, leading petty officers, and all these other people between you and your sailors. When I was a personnel officer, the shop was not. It was they didn't have the training and the manpower at the time, and so it was me and them, and we had to dig ourselves out of a hole, and we did. Luckily, we got a chief to help us do that. I mean, so all these things that we're talking about, the aviation fans that are listening, they may be going, I don't care about this. But as a naval officer, this is the kind of thing that makes it a fuller experience. You don't just get in a jet and go zoom around. You have to run the squadron and plan missions and all that other stuff.
Honestly, it's unlike the Air Force in that they just fly. They don't have ground jobs.
No, they don't interact with them. And there's nothing more personal than when you walk through the hangar and you see an F-14 broken down into numerous pieces, the engine's out, the tail's off. I mean, it's literally in pieces. And then, a couple days later, you come back and you're the one that's going to do the post-maintenance check flight on this machine. and you go in there and there's a, you're signing off a book that's, several inches thick of maintenance that's been done on this airplane over the last month or two, and it hasn't flown in forever. And your job is to start it up and take it up and go literally up to Mach 1.7, 1.8 and make sure that everything works right. And you can see in those maintenance guys' eyes, they know that they've got your life in their hands. They know that they have worked their tails off to make sure that this airplane is safe to go up in the air. And they know that you have to trust them, and you just get in it and you crank it up, and every once in a while all the hydraulic fluid squirts out on the ground, and they go, oh, sorry about that, come back in an hour and we'll have this fixed again. And then you go
I'm
try
supposed
again.
to do that.
Yeah, I'm thinking Brian's just going. Yeah, just waving your body, going,
work.
yeah, you look good.
That was very well said, Leekster. That was very well said. Exactly what he said.
I'm not sure that Brian took it so personal. I think it was more just a wave and go grab a cold beer, and you guys are good to go, and take care.
Our work is done. Have fun.
And I guess in your maybe in the 80s bio, every once in a while you guys would get to give a Sailor of the Year a ride or Sailor of the Quarter a ride. We never got really to do that. I thought it was really disappointing because we took a lot of midshipmen for rides and TV reporters and all kinds of folks I took for rides, but I really would have liked to take a couple of our maintainers for a ride because I think they earned it, the amount of hours they put in.
Totally agree with you. And we did not very much of that. We did a few incentive rides in my experience, but not enough. And okay, here's another example of the Wild West. When I joined, guys who had been in Phantom squadrons talked about some of the incentive rides and some of the other things they got away with, throwing people in the back seat. I mean, just to get them in the air, around the base or something. But it was some stuff that, you'd lose your wings if you did that in the later days.
Sure. It is kind of disappointing because I know you'll meet people every once in a while. They'll be like, "Oh, I got an incentive ride," and it's like one of the highlights of their life, Yeah. And I know what that was like because I started my career in aviation and maintenance, and I'm out there watching these guys fly around, and every once in a while they take me for a ride. I got to fly a helicopter, or I got to fly this or that I was working on, and it was a huge deal for me. So you get out to the airplane and the plane captain's there waiting for you, and he salutes you, and the airplane's all ready to go. And he's motivated and excited that you're going to get to go fly it, and that was a huge thing. It would have been so much more fun to be able to give one of those guys a ride every once in a while. But
so I'm wondering, taking back to kind of a little bit more about the early days in the Tomcat, because like I said, we're gonna talk movie stuff a little later. But when you guys were training, what we would consider these days a low threat environment, where you were not having any significant forward quarter threat, you were able to do stern conversions on them if necessary, and do that kind of thing, where you really didn't have any worry about them there.
No, it wasn't that bad for a couple of reasons. But go ahead. I mean, was that what you're wondering, or?
Well, no. So what I'm wondering is, did you feel basically invincible at that point? You kind of want that.
Here's why: because you're always outnumbered, and they would never let you do a stern conversion. I never engaged MiG-19s or 17s or 21s, but in Top Gun training and also the adversary squadrons, almost always they had at least GCI, even if they didn't have an air intercept radar, and they could see the F-14, 8 miles away. So they'd come nose on.
Well, there's that.
and most of the training, we did 2v2s and things like that, but we knew that was part task training. That was, building blocks. So you can work on your engaged comm, your engaged maneuvering. And then it's like, okay, you want to do realistic training. We're going 2v unknown, or even 4v unknown, but usually 2v unknown. And so yes, you had the best weapon system, but we rarely counted all of our forward quarter shots as kills. We rarely counted that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you're outnumbered. So there was no room for complacency even back then. And I've oversimplified it some because, we didn't walk into, even when I was in the RAG, but when I was in the fleet, we didn't walk into a briefing against, the bandits of VF-126 or whatever and go, oh, we're in Tomcats. We're going to go out there and kill you guys and then come back. And, no, it wasn't like that. It was, we took it seriously.
That'd be a little bit overconfident, right?
Yeah. And yeah, so it was never easy, even though we had a superior weapon system.
So in those days, I mean, this is a completely different experience than I had. We went through the timeline. We generally did the forward quarter Phoenix timeline, where you're cutting it to active at some great distance, assuming you've got some kind of an early declaration. For you guys, what was the kind of the standard intercept for you? Were you taking Phoenix shots at distance, or were you mostly holding those for?
No, until about 1987, 88, we rarely did not plan to use the Phoenix in a fighter environment because it was reserved for the outer air battle.
Okay.
Even though and I've talked to people who just don't know about it, and there's a lot of bad information. The Phoenix had good capability against a fighter-sized target, and the AIM-54 Charlie had great capability against a fighter-sized target.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it
Oh,
did.
it was awesome.
But there's a lot of BS on the internet that says, was not capable. Anyway, no, our plan was shoot a Sparrow and then try to get a forward quarter AIM-9 to follow it up, and hopefully that would be 2 kills. So, that would cut down.
I seem to remember when I was at the RAG, I'm talking 89, 90, but we did a lot of VID stuff. So
yeah.
Did you guys have, you were doing a VID hook basically if you had a passive target, right?
Right.
And if he cut into you, your wingman should have the lateral separation to be able to convert to negate the threat, right? And you go to the outside of the section or blow through an elite trail type thing. But did you guys have the TV?
TCS.
Yeah, did you have TCS when you went through first?
No, Leekster, and once again, I'm giving you your kudos, your comments about the hook VID, good lateral separation, blow, all that stuff. Those are all the words we used to say in the early 80s, briefing RAG flights and training flights in the fleet. We did not have TCS in my first squadron. I think there was some kind of problem with TCS. So we had it in my second squadron, VF2, which I joined in 1987. And there's good TCS videos online, and in the fighter fling had good TCS videos. But I wrote this in my book. I was sitting there after I finished the book. I was thinking about what did I not cover, and I did not talk about TCS in the book because when I think back on my career, I just didn't get that much tactical use out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one recording of an engagement, a 2v2 against F-15s. I should go back and listen to that and see if I talk about TCS on there.
That's a fair analysis because frankly, the TCS was not really good against a fighter-sized target for a VID, especially in a nose-on presentation. But I can tell you that I did some deployment up north, and we were running on some Bears and a couple other different Soviet larger aircraft, and at range you could get a VID, a really good VID with the TCS, but of course it was a much bigger airplane.
And what altitude were you guys at?
In the 20s, I guess. I'm guessing.
And
turboprop. The Bears are turboprop, so I want to say that they were usually cruising in the 20s, in the low 20s probably.
It just seemed like there was a lot of haze, and so trying to get a VID on an F5 or an A4 just.
Oh yeah, no, nose on with an F16 or an F5, you're not going to get a VID even with a TCS. It's just all you're going to see is a beacon and a dot.
Yeah.
Can you slave the TCS to the radar where your radar lock will show you? Show the TCS display.
Yeah, it should bore sight down the radar if you're actually taking an SGT or even a Twiz lock. Yeah.
But it could also go out to 10 degrees away from the center line, which is not that much.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing, Bio. That honestly, looking back, I mean, I remember we trained to do in TCS. It was better in the sim than it was in the jet, which is rare to say. For a lot of things for the Tomcat, but it really was that the environmentals were not generally very friendly.
There may be some Rios out there who say that they used it a lot, but I'm not that guy.
I could tell you like one time I remember I hate saying this too often, but in the D we had some other systems. Yeah, I know, right? Exactly.
You're going to be sitting in a nursing home one day saying in a wheelchair going, there's some things I can't talk about. In the D, I can't talk about this.
I still don't know what's classified and what's not about some of the stuff we had. But anyway, we had some ability to just classify the target out there. And there were a couple of times when using the TCS there was helpful. So you could say, this is what it's telling me, yes or no. Yeah, okay. Or this is what it's telling me, no, that's a bird, there's nothing there. Something along those lines. And so in that sense, it was a little bit helpful. But more than anything else, like you said, it was really good for getting videos on Fighter Flying.
This will make you cry, but in the mid 1980s, when the D was coming along, I just kind of remember that about every 6 months we would get, okay, here's the plan. They're going to start making all F-14Ds, and they're going to upgrade all A's to the D standard. And then 6 months later, it would be, okay, no, here's the new plan and all that. And I'm just going like, and as it turned out, it was just enough of a teaser to like, oh gosh, why?
It was a shame, really. I mean, and I know Lorenzo could talk for days about this, about why it didn't happen. And anyway, would have been a pretty sweet thing.
Yep.
So you had the one ejection. Did you have any other? Everybody, you couldn't fly the F-14 without having some other emergencies. I'm sure you had to shut down a motor here and there, or you had a hydraulic failure, or any other drama around the ship. I mean, you had quite a bit of at-sea time, I would imagine, right? How many traps did you end up with?
I had about 650 traps.
Okay,
that's a few.
Yep. My flying career was really. I got 1,000 hours 3 years after my first flight in the RAG.
Mm-hmm.
So considering that you spend about 10 months in the RAG or something, and I got about 100 hours, I got 900 hours in my first, 2 years and a few months in the fleet. So I flew a lot early, and then it tapered off. My mishap situation was, not too bad. I had that single engine cat shot in my first squadron. And then when I was a skipper, when we were flying across the country to start the deployment, so we were going from Oceania to North Island so we could load on board the Nimitz.
Yep, did that a few times.
I'd been the CO about 5 days. And right after we refueled, we got a bleed duct light. And this was in 1997. I hope I didn't say 87 earlier. It was 1997, and they had just lost several F-14s, I think, to ECS failures.
Just so folks that aren't familiar with the bleed duct, basically the airplane takes hot air off of the engine to run a bunch of systems. And when I say hot air, I'm talking 800 degree, 700 degree air. And if one of those lines decides to break loose from the engine, you can have 800 degree air blowing onto a fuel line or onto hydraulics or something that can cause a catastrophic failure of the airplane, meaning it can catch on fire or it can just explode.
And we
did lose a couple airplanes that way, and it was very unpleasant.
Yes, and we also had the turbine whine, so it was ECS turbine failure.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which is like a turbocharger blowing up, basically.
And so the pilot goes air source off. We declared emergency, and the nearest field was about 20 minutes away. And so for that 20 minutes, we're getting, some smoke in the cockpit. We're getting heat. We're getting all kinds of terrible noises, from our ECS. And the pilot made a good call. He told our wingman, divert with us. So we're trying to get 14 airplanes to San Diego, and here's my airplane. It has an ECS failure, and our wingman comes with us, and we diverted to Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. And the whole time we're going over there, that was like the only time in my career when I'm thinking, are we going to have to eject out of this? But we landed, and when we got out, I walked around to the side of the airplane where it was right on the right side. And I put my hand on it. The skin was really hot, the fuselage skin. So, I mean, there was a real problem. And that plane took weeks to get repaired. The other thing that I did that led to was our wingman said, okay, looks like you guys are here safe. We're going to man up and go on to San Diego. And at the last second, I go, wait a minute. I went over and I told DeRio, his call sign was Fez. I don't know if any of you guys know him, but I go,
I know Fez.
Yeah. I go, you got to get out of there because I need to be in San Diego more than you do. Since I was a skipper,
Skipper precedence, that's right. Did you get any old man jokes out of that? Oh, the old man's jet broke.
RHIP.
One of my JOs on just after a night cat shot. We were climbing out, and this is during workups. And this is when I was the XO. He goes, "So XO, what was it like over Hanoi?"
Right.
Dumbass.
A little better than it was over Berlin, right?
Yeah.
Gentlemen, one more time, the RWR is going off. And on the radar screen, we have Aaron Malik, Fights on Aviation.
Oh, Aaron.
Io, you might know this guy.
Yeah, I know him.
Hey, Bio, how you going, buddy?
Hey, Aaron, how you doing, man? You don't miss much, do you?
Hey, this is a complete surprise to me. I missed the message from you guys, the guys, yesterday, and only just spotted it like an hour ago. So this has all been a bit last minute for me.
Hey,
Nice.
welcome to the program.
So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Excited.
Have they been keeping you entertained?
Oh yeah, these guys are a good crowd, and they're asking good questions. They've got their own good stories also, so it's a nice venue.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And, it's a great round table. Incredible amount of talent. Having Dave on board lights the candles on the cake for sure. And some outstanding friends. Again, Aaron, you do a great job yourself at Fights on Aviation. And we thank you personally, honestly, for, again, honoring the F-14 and the community and keeping it going. And some great work with Paco and Bio. And just absolutely awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. How can you not be in love with the Tomcat, eh?
Oh, yeah. We wish the Aussies had picked them up. That would have been legendary. They'd still be going.
Absolutely. I remember reading somewhere that when we were looking to replace our old Mirage 3s and we ended up buying the Hornets, apparently they did consider the Tomcats, but for some reason didn't buy them, which is a bit of a damn shame. But anyway, such is life.
Yeah.
We're looking at F-11. That's the closest we get to a swing wing plane.
Right.
Hey, you did a lot of good work with those. I love the Australian 111s.
Yeah, the dump and burns, the Aussies, Unbelievable. Awesome.
Yeah, they used to. I don't know if you guys were the same in the US, but in Australia they used to call the F-111 the pig. Did you know about that?
We refer to it as the aardvark here, I think, or the vark.
The vark, which is not so glorious either, but
Vark in the EF model, and then it's the Vark in the standard model.
Yeah, no, I think it was more of a nickname, kind of referring probably to its not overly good looks, but pretty impressive functionality. So I was lucky enough to see some in real life because many years ago they used to have air shows. I live in Western Australia, and the closest RAF base to here is a base called Pierce, which is about, I think it's about an hour or 2 hours drive north. And I got to go to a few air shows there back when I was a young fella and saw the old F-111 do its thing. So it was pretty impressive.
Awesome, I bet. Something about those TF-30s, and no matter what you bolt them in.
I actually worked with a guy that ejected out of an F-111, and it was on a low level with a bird strike, and that ejection system on that airplane was really interesting, and to hear his ejection story was fascinating. And
it's like a whole capsule, right?
Yeah, it's an entire the cockpit section's a capsule that comes out of the airplane. And I think it had an airbag on the bottom of it, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't think the airbag worked. And they injured their backs, but it saved their life.
Yeah, it has
interesting story.
Two rocket motors on it. One rocket motor sets it straight up, another one keeps it level, and then it has the airbag on the bottom. I just recently went to one of our local museums, and I just got a chance to look at one. It's really neat looking.
Grumman actually modified that, I believe, because on the original 111 Grumman was working on, we actually lost the test pilots at Calverton, right off the runway.
Yes.
And into the grass, the plane caught on fire, and that system was not 0-0 eject. And the fire crew just sat there looking at the crew, and they perished. And they're trying to put the fire out and just not able to get them out of the airplane in time. So, again, there's an ejection capsule at the Cradle Aviation Museum from the F-111 program, and it's labeled by Grumman that they had re-engineered and redesigned it, I believe. It's an interesting...
Yeah, we've got a local aviation museum here in Perth, and I'm pretty sure I've got some photos or video footage of the capsule, which if you want I can send over to you guys at some stage.
That'd be great.
It's different to the usual ejection seat, that's for sure.
Hey, Aaron, I'm just curious. Were you there in Perth the last time we pulled in '04 with Tomcats?
I have lived in Perth since 1975. I was born probably in a small town about 2 hours south of Perth, but I've been in Perth since 75. Regrettably, back then, I don't know why or how, but I never managed to get down to Fremantle where they used to pull in and see any of the Tomcats. So I kick myself for it now, but I don't know why it happened, but never got to see any of them.
Because you thought it would go on forever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when that time when we pulled in, it was quite a thing. The Navy League was like, this is the last time Tomcats will ever be in, and we had that a lot, but last time they'll ever be in Australia. So it was kind of a bit of a party because, Aussies can party. So
The truth's coming out.
I can imagine.
Did Greenpeace chase you out of there though, like they did us in '98?
Oh, ouch. Thanks, Greenpeace. Thanks.
That was quite a sight with a giant cruise ship following us out, and then the skipper of the boat was telling them to get out of our wake because we were about to go full throttle, and we almost sank him when he went full throttle.
Awesome.
Pluses and minuses of Australia.
Yeah.
Making wage.
Lots of pluses. Snakes and spiders are some of the minuses.
Yeah.
So, actually, I have been lucky enough to see a Tomcat in real life, not flying, but when I was in the States in 2007, I think, I was in Florida. I got to go down to the Valiant Museum, which Bio knows well because he quite often goes down there and sells his books and talks to people. So,
Yeah, great.
but yeah, that's the closest I've ever come to a real life Tomcat, unfortunately.
That's my local museum now.
No, that's sweet. And it's awesome to see you there. And when you pulled that canopy handle and popped that baby open, the whole world took a breath. You weren't even sure what's going on because, I've been running my mouth at the end of each show about, wanting to fly a Tomcat again, and watching you crack that handle open, you made people just,
Oh, but all the Tomcat guys here who have done that go, I hope I don't screw this up. I mean, I don't,
Right.
I don't think I ever blew a canopy, but you could do it if you turned it too far or whatever it was.
Ooh.
I don't mean jettison the canopy. I mean blow the air pressure, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that was your big fear when you had the thing on the road for the weekend, that the first time you went to open the canopy, if you let all the nitrogen out of the system, then you're in big trouble.
Yep.
I'm curious, Bio. Do you have any jets that you've actually flown that are museums that you've gone back to see?
I have never tracked that down. Nope. I don't know.
Checkmates in Colorado at the Air and Space Museum there in the 14A. And then the
Yeah,
VF2A is also, we have California, and we have one at Fallon as well.
I could look. Oh, you know what? Okay, Siphon. I just thought there's a F-14 in museum up in San Francisco, and it is in the cover of Top Gun Days. There's a picture of an F-14 going vertical.
Yeah.
That bureau number is in a museum up in San Francisco.
Nice.
And so since I took that picture, it's in my squadron. Somewhere along the line, I flew that jet. So,
You definitely flew that jet.
Yeah, I wonder if it's the 101 Grim Reaper on Hornet Museum. It's an old F-14A.
Yeah, I don't remember. I looked it up, but I got it written down somewhere. But
That is awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, I understand for the aircrew side of things. You got so much going on, and rotation, BU numbers really aren't, 101 is up, we're gone. It's not about BU number, it's nose number, and it's mod X. And for the maintainers, it's kind of the same way, but the BUs get written down more. And for the pilots too, I guess each flight you guys will log your BUs. It's not a primary thought.
You see it show up in your logbook, and you might notice that as you're signing off a gripe sheet or whatever. Hey, this is a familiar number. And a couple of those numbers have been like, oh yeah, I remember that number. I've actually looked back in my logbook since then and be like, oh yeah, that's where that jet is. And it's actually easier to track that way. But sometimes you're like, I remember I flew 105. I flew 105 that particular day. I don't remember what I flew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. That's the way it was for us maintainers. It was get out there because number 03 needs something. And you guys, you pilots, you got logbooks. And that's where I'm getting some of my information, is finding pilots and saying, hey, what planes were you flying in during this time period, and
Okay, well,
find out where they are now.
I'm going to tell you guys a couple of sources that you can get this information. But first, I'll tell you one story. I was looking at my photos, and I got my magnifying glass out and looked at the bureau numbers, and I realized that a jet that I had in VF2 was also in VF211 10
That's
years
funny.
later. Yeah,
Interesting.
same bureau number. And so then I went back and I actually, so Leekster, this is something that I did. I didn't keep flight schedules, but I did keep a couple of those maintenance sheets that list all the airplanes you have.
Sure.
From VF2 and VF211. I went back and I cross-checked which airplanes were in both squadrons, and I found that there were several airplanes that I had two squadrons with. But let me tell you about online resources. One is, and Aaron, you may know, I don't know if you've got this a big library or not. Just a minute, let me look at this guy's name. Okay, there's an ebook, and it's called CVW, U.S. Navy Carrier Air Wing Aircraft, and it's by Mike Crutch.
I'm familiar with it. I don't have it.
Okay. But Brian, if you need some bureau numbers, that is a good one. And the other one, of course, is Dave Brown.
Tomcat Alley.
Tomcat Alley. Yeah.
Great book. Great book. And that must have been a lot of work to put that together, honestly.
Unbelievable what he did with that.
Yeah,
I was surprised. I have that one in my collection, and I was just floored. It's fun just to flip through it.
Oh, yeah.
That's like my whole grail when I'm doing Tomcat research. I have a lot of pages that are actually ticked off and with special notes alongside of different aircraft that I have already visited and ones I have planned to go to in the future.
You know, I have to say, growing up with Grumman, it was the strangest thing in the world the first day at Oceana when I saw a squadron painted on a Tomcat for the first, you know, I mean, I grew up, like, who didn't have a VF-84 Jolly Roger picture on your wall? Of course. I mean, I had one, everyone had one. That was just a way of life. But, you know, just the thought of seeing Tomcats brand spanking new, gray and white, or all even gray into the 80s when they were getting delivered at that point. But just always seeing them bare with a shop build number on the tails, unless it was 986, number 7, the prototype. Maybe it would be coming over the fence with a HARM missile under it. It was always testing something that they would bring to the fleet, and then the fleet would start testing it. But when I got to Oceana and I seen jets, squadrons painted for the first time, yeah, it was the coolest thing in the world to see the Black Aces, the Top Hatters, the Checkmates, the Tomcatters. And because for a kid, I'd never, around the factory, it's not like that. Even when the Navy remends an airplane, when they would send an airframe back for remanufacture, they would repaint the plane before it came back to Grumman usually, or at least clean the tail markings off of it, because they would come back and they would be clean upon arrival. Still have a Modex number on the nose, but nothing on the tails. And then ship name was removed off the glove, and then also the squadron name would be removed off the strakes under the engine. Wow. So it was awesome to see, I got to say, at Oceana. And, I explained in the last show the difference with the tempos with both places, both filled with Tomcats to say, but Oceana was a very upbeat tempo. There was, you see Tomcats coming and going all day long training. And
it was East Coast for one thing.
Yeah, and then at that point, all 350 of them or whatever, they were all sent back east, and it was an amazing time. But at Calverton, you'd be lucky to see a Tomcat fly a day. One. Sometimes they'd pull it out, they'd bring it over the flight line, they'd fire it up, do an engine test. You'd sit there for hours waiting. Then they close the canopy and tow it back in. You're like, huh? It's not flying? Are you kidding me? I sat here for I blew off my afternoon schedule. But, again, you go to Oceana and that's absolutely not the case. But the reward at Calverton was when and if it did fly, it was air show every single time. And they got to put the plane through its paces for its delivery flight before they can turn it over. And then the Navy takes it, does the same thing with it. And then the Navy makes the phone call and tells the squadron, come get it. And usually it goes to 124 or 101 for the first month or two. They work the bugs out of it brand new, and then it heads to the fleet. But some of the original ones were picked up by the fleet, because I have a plaque here behind me. When VF1, Dave sent me a picture today of VF1 and VF2 together in the sky, and it was humbling. Awesome picture, Dave. It's where it all began, like I said, and awesome. But I have a plaque from VF1 picking up the first F-14 Tomcat at Calverton.
Oh, that's cool.
It was given out to the factory line workers on the floor, and it has a VF1 patch on it, and it has a story telling you about the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, and it has a Tomcat patch next to it. It's where it all began, and what a history, and it's absolutely awesome bio to hear, your time involved with this program, it's part of the legend of the F-14 Tomcat. It's part of the success. And, Leekster, Siphon, Brian, Ole it's what brings it together. And, it's incredible. Incredible job by Ole, honestly.
Thanks, Lorenzo. You're doing an incredible job keeping it alive. So there you go, man. Everybody's doing their part.
We're doing our best. And, we have almost near 50,000 people supporting us now. And it's astonishing. We're taking it into the future. We're 2020. We're leading the way. And, it's kind of cool that it's coming right out of Grumman, Calverton, the roots of the soil, where the very airplane was, well, I'm not going to say formed. We'll say Bethpage was where it was manufactured. Calverton was where it was assembled, and that was flight test. If I get that wrong, they'll kill me. Bethpage, you know how the Navy has a camaraderie of, squadrons, or even you'll have your inner camaraderie of F-14 squadrons, and then you got your F-18 camaraderie, your A-6 camaraderie. Everyone's always teasing each other, but, obviously always collectively working as a unit. But it's the same thing here on Long Island. Calverton and Bethpage would have their camaraderies of who is the best, who did the best work, It was awesome because in the end, it all come together and come off the runway in Zone 5 full throttle into a vertical climb out, and awesome. But you got scared. Here's something I want to mention for a historical note. When you saw a brand new F-14 Tomcat fly over the fence at Calverton, and it had orange suits on the pilots. Those are Grumman test pilots. And
Right.
They would take it through its first couple of flights to get, all the bugs out of it. When you saw green suits in that brand new airplane, that was the Navy taking delivery of that airplane and accepting it. A lot of times they were cool and they would rock the wings on the way out. And that would let you know that Tomcat was going home. It was completed and it was going to the fleet. Everyone, and you wouldn't see it again.
That's a nice gesture. That's nice.
Yeah, really.
Again, everybody, and I'm sure you guys all know this, you felt special being around the F-14. You felt special being in the program. It was special to be there. You couldn't not acknowledge the hype that went with it, especially after Top Gun. I can't imagine Leekster running around on the beach with that surfboard in 1989, and Top Gun just came out, and he's meeting Admiral Connolly, and such great history, and it's awesome to share it. It really is.
When you were mentioning taking one and flying it out and waving the wings, it reminded me that I actually took one out to Davis Monthan and dropped it off. And that was the last that we saw that bird.
Oh.
That was a sad, sad day.
There's no 102s left there, so you know what happened to it.
Yeah.
Aaron, you got to jump in?
I have to say, as an outsider looking in, not having been in the military or the Navy or the Tomcat, it blows me away how amazingly popular that plane is. I mean, it's right up there with the likes of the Spitfire, for example, which is like one of the most iconic planes ever. People just love it. When we were doing the promotion for the Tomcat 50th anniversary celebration, I was just amazed at how many people came out of the woodwork from the stuff I was doing on Facebook saying, I love this plane, sign me up, all that kind of stuff. It was incredible. So it says a lot about the plane and the people who made it and the people who flew it.
It definitely is a internationally known and recognized all over the world and by so many different folks of all ages.
I don't want to not say that I haven't sent out Tomcat stickers to maybe some Russian Su-27 pilots that maybe put them on the inside of their locker at the base.
That's cool.
But, again, who doesn't love the Tomcat? It's the Tomcat.
I had a very cool conversation not too long ago with a MiG-31 pilot. We were going back.
Russian?
No, unfortunately, my is it's not that good. So, but yes, it kind of started off like that. He's like, "Well, how did you get into Russian aircraft? You're an American." I said, "Well, I got some bad habits over here." But anyway, we were going back and forth, and he saw the page, and he's like, "Wow, I really do love the Tomcat. It's incredible. I like Top Gun." And I'm like, "Wow, that's kind of neat. A Russian pilot talking about Top Gun." And then we got into a little like 1v1 type of situations. Not to throw out the ding to the Hornet community, but he put out there, he goes, if a Tomcat came up, we didn't want to play. With Hornets, we were not worried about them.
Interesting. We should have this guy on.
Yeah.
That would be.
I don't know if he knows about the radar in that Super Hornet. I'd be worried.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Well, let's keep that to ourselves, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
It might not have range, but it's got power in the nose, that's for sure. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. And, again, I thank everybody, and it's special to have, put together a Christmas show for this and put the platform together, like I said in the beginning, and bring everyone on, and looking forward to doing this regularly all the time. And it's something really cool, some great stories out there, and it's absolutely awesome to share them. And, as what we're doing continues to grow, it shows not just the hard work of all of us in this circle here and what we're doing, but I think more than that, it exemplifies the hard work that went on for 36 years, United States Navy, and Grumman making sure that the Navy had what they needed to go out and, accomplish that mission. So it's quite special, honestly. And, to bring it all together in the maintainer aspect, the pilot aspect, the Rio aspect, it's absolutely awesome to be able to feature you guys. And when Erin did that 50th anniversary a while back, part of that, and it was absolutely awesome, and great guest on there. And again, Tomcat Tales,
Well,
another one that came out.
That's all down to Bio and Paco for those guests. I just sat back and enjoyed the ride. It was the best experience of my
I
life.
was going to say the opposite. When Aaron started talking about it, I'm starting to go, okay, you want to do this? Here you go. We'll feed you as many names as you can handle, and you put it all together.
Yeah, but that was a great special. It really was. And it was a long one, too. It went on a while, but the content.
7 hours and 14 minutes.
Yeah. Whoa. I remember it being long, but I remember being upset it was over already. That's how good it was. The content was it was great. And, Megan, and really cool. It was awesome. And it was great to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. I would love to have been able to come over to the States for the proper 50th anniversary, but obviously COVID kind of put the kibosh on that. So hopefully next year or the year after, we might be able to get over and see something.
That would be absolutely awesome. And, one of the things I like to talk about at the end of each show is flying an F-14 Tomcat again as an air show warbird. It's time. It's time to do it. We got 7 airframes sitting in the desert. We got a couple of A's, a couple of B's, a couple of D's, and the A's are out of the question.
Oh, I thought Cheney had destroyed all of those.
No, not yet. Not yet.
We have 7 sitting in preserve status. They're basically, they were set aside for a possible warbird, and then at the same time, they're set aside for museum options to be able to hand out.
Yeah.
But recently, and I'm not even happy to say this, there's a VF-31 F-14D Tomcat still in its shrink wrap, sitting at a bombing range in SoCal now. That's not cool. But I
Tell me that's not 112.
I can get the BU off of it. It'll take some time. I understand why they need it for the electronic radar signature for whatever new system they're developing for whatever reason. But again, at the same time, there's plenty of other airframes you could use in a fully complete, perfect F-14, not perfect, but fully complete F-14 off the floor in AMARC. But again, I know Dave cringes because Dave actually really truly knows the maintenance behind the airplane, and he knows you want to fly an F-14. He actually knows what's involved to do something like that, and the money it takes and the work. But I would say that the heart of the F-14 expense has always been the weapon system in the airplane, never so much the mechanical system. Like any mechanical system, it needs to love any airframe. But the weapon system was really the heart of the money in that airplane. And by not using, I can't say removing it because you need it for ballast. So by not using the weapon system, by opening the radome up and beating it with a hammer so it don't work no more and the Navy's happy, then, we can leave the ballast in place. But again, like I had said, though, originally, Dale had mentioned that he wanted to do this in about 2004. He had asked the Navy. They were not on board with that. Obviously, security issues, along with some political red tape involved that didn't want these airplanes to fly anymore, period. So that would be the end of that. But what we proposed, Bio, was that the Navy would actually keep the airframe. It's theirs. Let them keep it. Why wouldn't they not keep it? Put it at a base like NAS Lakehurst, New Jersey, or Pax River at a test school. Leekster had mentioned about making it available to the test pilots so that they could use it as an educational curve as well. And the few times they could sneak it out for an air show, even if it was just static display. We understand what's involved in flying the airplane. If you went with a D, it would be the premium airplane to fly, but with all the MFDs and the displays and all the avionics needed to make that all happen, and a lot of that removed, you can end up left with what's the best choice is an F-14B. The F-110s are still in production, parts are available. The gauge is mostly steam gauge, powered on the dash. So it basically comes down to money and showing the Navy the proper support to get something like this done. And to do that, you'd get GE on board to sponsor the engines. You'd get BF Goodrich, Goodyear to put brand new tires on it. You get Bendix involved, put the brakes back in it. You get IFF in it again. You call all of these DoD manufacturers. They have worked their butts off for many years. They've also gotten a lot of money from DoD for the programs that they work on. And I'm sure they'd be proud to give back in a moment like that, especially now, this would be the right time to bring back the golden age of naval aviation, Warbird, as an F-14 Tomcat demo.
Just imagine.
The would go ballistic if they did that.
Well, we're to the point now.
People would want to know about that.
We're to the point now that we're considering putting a Patreon together to do this. And it's nothing more than to show the Navy the support by the world. And I say world, I don't mean America, the world. I got 50,000 people behind this. They're not all Americans. I got people from Germany. They'll send you their kid's piggy bank. You fly a Tomcat. Iranians will send you money. It's that. I've had Iran contact me, people that work at Estefan at Overhaul, and they've said to me, maybe part of the road of peace would be send us an F-14A and accompany it, and we'll run it through Overhaul for you and send it back to you flying. And, again, part of a road of peace of let's work together. And, it's a strange situation because of the security issues with Iran. The governments of our countries do not get along. We're all clear on how DOD trains with it. But the people of both countries get along. The civilians, the citizens have, I don't want to say no problem with each other, but they get along very well. It's a government problem. So respecting that is why you tell the Navy, you keep the airplane, you pick the pilots. Maybe you want to use your Blue Angels as they check out of the Blue Angels as an opportunity. Maybe you want to use test pilots, which I think is the best answer.
No, I think they want to use a guy named Leekster and a guy named Siphon. I'm pretty sure that's what they want to do.
But I'm telling you, I mean,
I think we could put that into the campaign.
Bio looked really good at Valiant Air Museum with his table out, talking to you in that airplane behind him, selling his book. But what would be better than that? Not even hearing Bio, but seeing his mouth moving and the Tomcat running behind him with the table and his books blowing off of it as it taxis away. And he's screaming and cheering and he's out of his mind.
Man, that would be amazing.
Yeah, just remember to find that alpha breaker and figure out how to reset that thing, will you?
God.
Right.
7C8.
These airframes can't obviously sit forever. And there's going to come a point where they've sat so long that they're done. So by taking a collection of, the heads of the community from everybody, the tops of the people, and putting them together and showing the Navy. I'm seeing some logbook work here.
No, that's his PCL.
He's bringing out the emergency checklist.
Oh, there you
PCL, go dude.
But by showing the Navy that we got the maintainers, we got everyone to coach you and guide you. We can put the volunteers in place. We'll do everything to raise the money for this airplane. And if we over-raise money because people are that excited, send that money to the frontline squadrons right now in the F-18 Super Hornet. Buy them new gear. Buy them, help them. We're not so much about, the Tomcat. We all love the Tomcat, but I think we all really, truly love naval aviation, really. If there was no F-14s at the time, Leekster still was joining, and he's still taking something out to the boat with a tail hook. He was still, you were going to hear, whatever ball, 6.4.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you what, that's a dream come true. Just getting in the Navy for me, and being in the aviation program. That was a long struggle. I actually got turned down a couple times. So by the time they accepted me to go, I can honestly, I can't tell you how badly I wanted it. Felt really fortunate to get through flight school and then get selected to fly that thing. I mentioned before, Bio, maybe you had this feeling, but the first time I walked out to an F-14 at the RAG, I had imposter syndrome. I honestly couldn't believe that I was going to actually get to operate that machine that was in front of me. And I thought any second now, somebody's going to step out and grab me and go, no, not you. We made a mistake. I just couldn't believe I was going to get to fly this fighter plane.
Same.
It's such a beautiful machine.
Absolutely. Same. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I when I think back, I don't know. I just walked out there with Crush, the guy that my first F-14 pilot was Crush Gallhofer. And we just walked out, manned up, and let's go.
and had fun.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was exciting. There was a guy in my class on his first flight, Rio. He caught on fire on a takeoff roll, and they aborted the takeoff, and the airplane burned up. And they jumped out. The fire trucks came out and put it out, and they ended up breaking that airplane in half and using the front half, and they connected it to another airframe. And I don't know which bureau number the airplane became after they connected the two airframes to each other.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
You know, Pensacola used to have some simulators at the Naval Aviation Museum that were half an airplane kind of thing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they used that kind of thing too.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty
Well,
wild.
I'll tell you what, if you guys want to set up a Patreon for that, I'll certainly donate and get as many people as I can, because I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, it's time. And, you know, what's the bottom line? We want to honor you guys. We know the history, you know. What happened to the airplane in the end? I'm going to choose my words carefully here. And I'm going to say that I don't believe it was the right thing, that what happened to that airplane and what it was capable of and what it did for our country and how proud the people who operated it and wrenched it were at that time. We owe that to them, and especially the children. I've said how many people, we have a pretty young age follower limit on our page, and how many young kids never saw a Tomcat fly? It is. I have a hard time even understanding that, because I grew up with Calverton, and I always joke I saw all 712 fly away, but I guess I did miss a few because I'm born 9 months after the first flight, literally almost to the day. Don't even ask. It's just a part of life to me. I can close my eyes right now. I hear the engines at every stage. I hear them whistling for landing. I hear them zone 5 climbing out. And, the first time I heard an F-110 in it. But these kids, we owe this to them. We all lived that life of knowing this airplane and how it reaches out and grabs you. And like I said on the last show, and it's, ladies and gentlemen, from the left, you're Grumman F-14 Tomcat. It's like, Tomcat, it's awesome. It's something that we owe to honor the people who worked so hard to make that airplane the legend it is, the success that it was. Because without any of you, it's just a piece of metal and it doesn't make any noise and it just sits there. But with the love of the maintainers, the brain power of the heart of the airplane, and that's your radar intercept officer in the backseat. The guy up front driving Miss Daisy, Jeeves, as Tongue called him on the last show. He's got 2 jobs. Get in the tanker and trap. You could do those 2 things. We're going to have a great flight. And it is absolutely special. It's special, the camaraderie, and it's something we owe everybody. We really do. And I'm willing to work as hard as I can to make that happen. I'm already in process and motion doing it. And I see so many others working so hard. And I think by rallying everybody together, the Navy loves to be honored. And, again, they would do this themselves, I'm sure, but they have no money, and respectfully so. If they did, it goes to the squadrons. It goes to the frontline people who need that money. And, to play with something that they spent how much money for how many years to fly it. And that's where we step in and say, well, let us do what we can. Let us help offset the cost. Let us get donors to step in, manufacturer companies, like I said earlier, GE and maybe Goodyear, Michelin, and make this happen. It's something that we have so much to gain for by as not just a country, but as a planet. And I said on the last show, when that cat taxis by for the first time on the runway at an air show, and everybody's singing, "You've Lost That Love and Feeling," it would be one of the most special moments on this planet that ever took place. And if you weren't there for it, you would hate yourself, because it would be more of a special moment than any flight that almost ever took place at any, given air show to say. And Cat is back to say it can be done, but there's a reality to it, and there's a heavy maintenance program to it. And Bio knows those planes, you're going to break them down to 1,000 pieces on the hangar. They're not flying for a year or so. The AMARC maintainers tell me that there is a couple, and I'm assuming they're the Ds they're speaking of. They could do turnarounds on them if they got the orders, and they could pull them back up front. And they were properly oiled when they were put away, is what I'm told.
When we parked that last jet, that's exactly what they told us, that it was going into a special storage to be ready to go. And
the one in particular they're speaking about to me, the 2 they're speaking about are the Ds. They are it's AJ213, which is the blue Tomcat, and then AJ112, which is VF31's Tomcat.
Yep.
Those two Tomcats were last flown in 2009 for maintenance checks, or 2008, I think it was. And that was when they had changed the program over for their storage level. They got bumped to a lower storage level where they were getting ready to get processed into the shredder. So the jets, you know, they do pull them off the floor every 3 months to 6 months. And when they're in that war reserve program, and they check them, they oil them, they run them in the hangar. They make sure that if the Navy makes the phone call, they have something working viable to hand them. But on their last time running, I was told that they knew that no matter what would happen with, you know, disposal, these airframes were going to survive. They are set aside. Based on that, he's like, I can't tell you how oiled they are. He's like, we knew, and we were, you know, we still hope to this day somebody's going to come for them. And, you know, in a way that's good. In a promotional way for the United States Navy. And
amazing.
The amazing veterans like you, Bio, like Siphon, Leekster, Ken, Brian, the list goes on. I could name air crews all day long. You guys all just an incredible job, and we're proud of all of you, as we really are. Something I don't ever not think about once when I walk past the Tomcat. I'm proud of your hard work. I'm saddened for the people that lost their lives in it, especially because it's such an incredible platform, and they made their dream. They made their dream come true, and it happened, and they got in the jet, and they got certified, and for whatever reason, a hiccup in life, they lost their life. And not ever think about them once or disrespect them, especially you guys too, I'm sure, because you knew them personally, a lot of names, and you know the smiles, the names, the voices, and that's what I call on when I say fly this airplane again. It's for all those who can and all those who couldn't. We owe it. I thank everybody for joining us tonight. It's been an absolutely special show, and great content tonight. And Bio, your career is absolutely amazing. Just want to wish you personally a Merry Christmas, and wish Laura a Merry Christmas as well.
Oh, thanks,
Absolutely
Lorenzo.
special.
Thanks again for having me.